Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the...
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
So I do want to get to a question that we had that was sent in that I promised, and I saw that they're here watching. They said, first, a huge thank you and lots of love from Holland to you both. I watch your show religiously, and you have helped me navigate autism and open my eyes on so many things that help my 4-year-old son. My son was diagnosed at the age of 3.5 with autism. He is now 4.5 and just started ABA and doing great. Congratulations. He speaks in words and very small sentences in 3 languages. How about that? Arabic, English, and Dutch, as we use the 3 languages at home fluently. He's a very happy boy. He can read and spell words. He does not like to write, but uses the iPad to tick all the things he wants to search and to watch on the iPad. His favorite is SpongeBob. We just recently were at an event with Clancy Brown, and all of the kids that were there were going crazy because he's the voice of Mr. Crab. He also likes Paw Patrol and Pac-Man, to name a few. The therapist here says that he has mild autism and that he's extremely smart. Okay, so here's the issue. He sleeps well usually through the night and is diaper-free since the age of 3. He sleeps in his room. When it is bedtime, we go to the toilet, wash our teeth, take him to bed, we sing a song, cuddle, I say goodnight. But last time, for the first time, he had a nightmare, and she couldn't snap him out of it. He kept saying stop in his sleep and crying. They held him and gave him kisses and shook his head, and he was not waking up from the dream. His father used water on his face, and only then did we manage to get him to wake up a little. He quickly closed his eyes and went back to the nightmare, which lasted about 15 minutes of continuous crying. This is the first time this has happened, and it worried me so much that I couldn't snap him out of his sleep. He woke the next day cranky and was not himself. Please help me on what we should do if the nightmare returns. And they said, thank you so much for your help and support.
Sure, and of course, it's kind of pretty scary, I can imagine, when your child has that kind of a reaction in the middle of the night. You're thinking, oh my gosh, what's happening? Why isn't he waking up? And I am not sure that it was a nightmare. And I think if it was my child, I would want to make sure that there's nothing else going on. So I think, and I don't know how easy or difficult it is in Holland. I'm guessing it's not that easy, but I would recommend that you try to get what's called a sleep EEG. So it's an electroencephalogram during sleep. So that means you have to find a sleep clinic. Usually these places are connected to universities. You can contact whatever university you are closest to and see if they have a sleep disorders clinic. What you're looking for is whether or not there was some sort of subclinical seizure going on. Given that he is high functioning, he could have been trying to say he wants to end the seizure feeling. So I guess I would want to rule that out. I'd really want to check and make sure there's not a seizure going on. That would be my #1 concern. If it is clear and there's no seizure activity, then don't worry, because you're not gonna, a nightmare is not gonna do any kind of harm. And all you can really do if it occurs again, just hold him. It's okay. It's like sleepwalking. Sometimes kids sleep very, very deeply. They have a hard time waking up from it. Don't let it scare you. But, you know, the only scenario where it could be anything scary is if it's not a nightmare, if it's a seizure happening. So the other thing, and obviously he's with you most of the day because he's only 4.5, I believe.
Yes.
But, you know, make sure that there's nothing bad happening in any of the environments that he's in. For instance, if he goes off to school, because remember, nightmares are usually a reflection of something that has happened during the day. So just make sure that he's in a safe environment with loving people during the day as well. And then I think you should probably there's nothing else to really worry about. Did you have a thought on it too?
Well,
Shannon?
I mean, the only thing that I think is that what I got from your letter, and which I so appreciated, was we go through these things where something, like it feels like everything is going along, and everything
suddenly something,
and you feel like there's a moment where as a parent you feel like, okay, I think maybe we have this.
Yeah.
And then something happens.
Yep.
And all of the fear that we had from before comes whoosh, right back.
Yeah.
And we get into this moment. I used to say all the time to our supervisor, because the thing with my son was that my son had skills and then lost them. And it's a normal part of later on, I guess, I don't know, just autism, but it may be in all kids, where, you know, he would get a skill and then we would move on to something else, but maybe that other skill would start to regress a little bit.
Sure.
And our team would catch it. And they would go, oh, that's regressing, so we're going to go back and get that. And I would full on panic.
Yeah.
Because I would think it was the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
And all of the fear and all of the angst of, I don't know what to do, crushingly would come back. And that's really what I got from this letter, was this poor mom, that things are going so well and now we've had a nightmare, and you're caught in the fear of it and the grip of it. Oh no, what is this?
Absolutely. And it's so interesting because that fear is just such a big deal, right? It's like it controls us in so many ways, and it's all really in our head. I do want to say a couple of things, if I can add to it. It's not, so like for me, when you go through this experience, I mean, I wish I could see your child, because when you see a child and they go through a subclinical seizure, the thing that made me actually think of the seizure was what mom wrote and said the next day he was fully exhausted.
Yeah.
Because you're like burning massive amounts of glucose. You're going to be so tired the next day after a seizure. That's why, for me, it's like, okay, let me find out if it is a seizure. And by the way, I don't want to make you scared of a seizure, is I think the key to this. You know, the more we know, a lot of times I have parents who come in and they it's almost like they're afraid to really know the answer, because it's like one more thing to deal with, as you said, Shannon, and it's one more scary thing to deal with. But I want to say, like, knowing more leads to answers. So if it is a seizure, please don't be afraid. First of all, sometimes our kids actually only have a few seizures and it finishes before they're older. Like, they just don't have any more once they become 8 or 10. Sometimes you will find out about the seizure and there's a medication that you can take that controls it forever. Sometimes you'll find out that, just a simple dietary change will stop the seizures and will lead to better awareness, better learning. So there's a lot of, knowing is very important, and you will be able to definitely work with it, treat it, and take care of it if it should be a seizure. But the other thing that I wanted to say is, and I love that he is learning 3 languages, that's beautiful, but this is going to be a little hard, but I would recommend, that you drop down to 1 language initially, and I'll explain why. It's up to you, really, but here's what happens. Bilingualism or trilingualism, just bifactual research shows that it slows down language development. So any person who learns 2 languages or 3 languages will slow down in their acquisition. That's just the way it is. So depending on how vocal he is and how expressive he is, one thing you could do to speed up his language acquisition is to select 1 language rather than 3. Now, right now, he's mostly at home, for instance, and he will, most of the time when kids are trilingual, there will be certain expressions that they say, for instance, that he says in Arabic, certain things that he might answer in Dutch, and certain things that he might answer in English or express in English. And once he goes to school and then only has, let's say, Dutch-speaking teachers, although in Holland, English and Dutch are very common, He might say something in Arabic and someone else won't understand, and then it will frustrate him because he'll be like, what's going on? I've always used this word. So I think maybe bringing it down to Dutch and English might help as well. You know, if you don't want to go down to one language, at least two languages. Yeah. That's one thing that, like, I know for a fact, I've seen a lot of my kids. By the way, he can bring back Arabic later, but just to get him to the point where he's fully expressive and able to say all the things that he wants to say when he wants to say them, then later on you can add more languages. As you know, some of our adult kids speak like Spanish and English very fluently now, but when they were younger, we used to really keep it down to one language.
There we go. She did write back in and say, thank you for your reply. How can I identify a seizure? Now, obviously, we're talking about going in and getting a test for it, but if it's something happening at home, how might we know that that's what it is, Dr.
You know,
Granpeesheh?
that's the issue. Subclinical seizures you can't see. That's why they're called subclinical. You can't see shivering or shaking. It's not a grand mal seizure. So it's not like you're going to see the same stuff. But there's unusual brain activity occurring. And that's why you need the EEG to be able to tell you if it is actually happening or not.
But correct me if I'm wrong, they have different kinds of EEGs where, you know, they can hook you up for 15 minutes, but if you're having a subclinical seizure in the night, that's not going to do it. So we're really recommending doing an overnight one, at least one night.
Yeah, because, and that's what they will, the doctor will recommend that as well. Yeah. And these days, you know, I'm not sure, but I mean, there are such an advance in technology. I wouldn't be surprised that there are devices, you know, that have very, very tiny electrodes that could be placed, and he could perhaps come home even. Yeah. Like a lot of these types of EEGs are now mobile, and you can do them at home, like EKGs that you can also wear. Yeah. So perhaps that would be something available to you. I really don't know, but I do recommend that you get in touch with a local, like a sleep clinic, and I do recommend you go to the university, because that's where you will find these more sophisticated sleep clinics.
Yeah, we have something in Southern California now where there is a truck that comes to your house and they put the little cap on your child's head, and then they're parked in the truck across the street. They're not in your house. Your child sleeps in their bed, which is amazing, because I think for a lot of us, I think back a million years ago when Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson and we had Lisa Ackerman from Taka on the show, and our kids were younger. Jem was like 8 or 9, which would have meant that Wyatt was 9 or 10. And we were asking her, like, what are the things that you recommend to families across the board? And she said, I think that, you know, before they get to puberty, you should do a baseline EEG. Yep. And she said, because we see that, you know, sometimes we catch something that we didn't know was there. Sometimes it's there because later on, if something happens when they hit puberty and there's a chemical change. Anyway, we heard that, you know, 2 women who are supposed to be paying attention, and neither one of us went and did it. And why? Because we couldn't figure out how to have our child wear a cap overnight and be someplace with strangers. Yeah. And both of us took a pass on it and said, I'll do that later. And as you guys know, if you watch the show, then Nancy's son ended up having a seizure at the age of 18 and out of nowhere. And what's the first thing they said? Did you do a baseline EEG? And you know, she kicks herself on a daily basis now. But, you know, the end of the story is that Wyatt went on a special diet. Wyatt is on some medication, and Wyatt had 1 more seizure after that, but that's when they changed the diet. Yep. And is totally fine, and there we are. Yeah. But Nancy wishes that she'd done that baseline EEG.
But you know what? It's okay, because, like, honestly, it's not. It's just, it is a difficult procedure, right? And hopefully by now it's gotten easier. I don't know how much easier
some places in some ways, but we don't know in Holland.
But I do want to say that, like, one of the wonderful things is that, you know, Europe does have very significant medical advances that sometimes we are behind. Like, you know, there's already much more development in stem cell treatments and things like that in Europe. So find out, and I'd be interested to know if it is a possibility for you to get an easy sleep EEG.
There we go. Now, Carl had written into us the other day and said that he wants someone to make a documentary which explores autism by asking the question, what is it like to be neurotypical? And they said, I would gladly participate. And I'm assuming, Carl, that you want us to ask people who are on the spectrum, what does it mean to be neurotypical? I find that fascinating.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's ever done that.
No, absolutely.
And now I want to go and ask all of my friends.
I was the one. Yeah, honestly, it's so motivating to like, oh, I wonder what they think of this.
Yeah, what would they say? What does that look like to them? I was listening to a thing the other day where they had recorded children being asked, what does hatred mean? Aww. What does bigotry mean? And they were like, I don't know. Aww. I don't know what any of those things are. And it just really drove home how we add those things in later on.
If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.
Don't forget, you can watch Ask Dr. Doreen live every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time on autismnetwork.com. We hope to see you there.